On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we go through 3 areas in 3 games of Kevin Durant's tenure here with the Suns. The stats, the quotes, everything you need to know about how this team has looked, how they've played, how dominant they've been over the past week. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Wednesday, Tuesday night maybe for some of you. Game day on Wednesday, home debut of Kevin Durant. If you like what you're hearing on the show, if you want to get a ton of Suns info, a ton of Suns analysis, a ton of Suns conversation in your feed every Monday through Friday, this is the place for you. So hit subscribe, hit follow. If you're finding us on any podcast platform, including YouTube, we're free. We're ever going to have a paywall. So the best way to support the show is just to listen, follow, and subscribe. Drop a comment down below with your thoughts on anything related to this Suns team here on this Wednesday as well. You can also follow along at Locked On PHX Suns, catch up on Twitter, get the shows, new shows, fun stuff, retweets. You know the drill. 3 key stats from KD's first 3 games, but I went extra. It's not even 3 stats. It's 3 buckets of stats, and I have a bunch for you within each one. I also went to practice today, Suns practice, and I have some takeaways and quotes from my time there. All right, so that'll be the deal today. And let's dive in. The first is dominance. Overall, we have the dominance of the Suns as a team. We have the dominance of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker as a duo, all right? And I have 3 stats for each, so that's already 6. How's that sound? All right, so the Suns have an NBA best plus 15.4 net rating outside of garbage time in the past 3 games. So they are 8th in offense, 6th in defense. That adds up to the best overall net rating. They're outscoring opponents by 15.4 points per 100 possessions in that span of time. That is everybody's 3 games. So that's not just the past week where some teams played 2 games, some teams played 3. That's just sorted out by 3 games. All right. So sounds pretty good, right? I understand. And the caveat with a lot of these things, guys, because we'll get to usage, we'll get to shot diets, shot distribution later in the show, some quotes on that stuff. Especially on the defensive end, I would say it's going to be very hard to measure small samples because offense, it's like, okay, this guy's shooting more, that guy's shooting more, they're taking more shots from here, they're doing this, they're doing that. Lineup stuff can be easy to see, okay, that's really working, that's not working. Defense, I would say, is the number one thing where it's going to take some time to really see the trends of how they're playing differently, what's resulting in that, and on and on. And also, Charlotte and Chicago are not exactly the best teams in the NBA, right? So it's one very competitive head-to-head matchup with Dallas, and then 2 with the Bulls and the Hornets that are a little bit, less obvious, less competitive, everything else. But that is excellent. The best net rating in the league over those 3 games is literally as good as it gets. They obviously have a 3-0 record, right? Just from a standing standpoint, they are 2 games up on the 4 seed. The Warriors are actually about to lose as I'm saying this, so that'll put them another game up, basically, over the Warriors for that 4 seed. That is looking good. But looking ahead, and honestly, even this week looking ahead, this record, and even what they did before the All-Star break and what they did beating the Thunder the first game out of the All-Star break, they've been playing well. They've been winning. They're only 2.5 games back right now from the 3 seed, which is Sacramento. Okay, so by continuing to win games and be dominant despite this integration process for Durant, they are also catching up to the 3 seed, which would be very big. It would allow them to avoid the Warriors in the first round and instead get the Clippers or the Mavs. Worse teams, worse matchups maybe as well, but I think avoiding Golden State with Curry healthy is probably going to be good in the long run. The last thing on a team standpoint, actually, we'll come back to that. duo. That's the bucket of this few stats, all right? Dominance from the team, dominance from this duo. So let's get into those. I'm sure you saw the statistic going around of most points by one duo in the first 3 games of their partnership in NBA history. And it was 3 slots. The top 3 were all Wilt plus somebody. Funny thing is, though, it was not like Wilt's best teammates. It was Wilt and a lot of guys you've never heard of. The Suns are the only team with a duo in modern NBA history to have 188 plus points ever in the modern history of the game. The Suns have, so that's just scoring, right? In terms of on-off stuff, when Devin Booker and Kevin Durant have both been on the floor, the Suns have outscored teams by 49 points already. All right, so just think about that. I mean, the margin of the game the other night was 4 points, I believe, right? The margin, even against Chicago, the margin was 21 points. Against Charlotte, it was 14. So if you add that up, that's only 39, right? So I guess that would indicate, now that I'm doing the math in real time, that in the minutes when both players haven't been on the court all together, maybe that's neither on the court, maybe that's just one on the court, in all those minutes, I guess you would say the Suns have been outscored by 10. I have not checked that. But that's the way the math should work. That is bonkers. Those guys being out there is about as surefire of a way for the Suns to build a lead or take back a lead as anything could possibly be for a team right now. The last one here is basically just extrapolating that out on a per 100 possessions basis. All right. So the Suns with Booker and Durant on, again in non-garbage time, that's via cleaningtheglass.com, have a plus 37.8 net rating. So when Booker and Durant are on the court, over the course of each 100 possessions, they're outscoring teams by 37.8 points. That's insane. All right. Here's the final stat that I was going to share as far as the overall team dominance. But the reason I saved it is it's really driven by those two guys, right? In 62 games prior to Durant making his debut, the Suns had a 95.6 offensive rating in the half court. I believe that was bottom 10 in the NBA. All right, so we know they were basically a 500 team until he came, or just before he came, but overall, basically that. Their defense was really what was keeping them strong over the course of December into January into February, when they were just treading water, basically. A lot of that was defensive. Not a lot of it was offensive. In the past 3 games, the Suns have a 112 half-court offensive rating. So they went from under 96 points per 100 possessions in the half-court in 62 games to, yes, a smaller sample, but they added, they went 16 and a half points better in the past 3 games than what we had come to be used to in the rest of the season. That is incredible. Probably the single best indication of how much things have changed. And that gets us to the quotes here that we heard at practice, right? I love this one from Monty. There's 2 things that I think we're going to really hear as through lines over the rest of the season on the offensive philosophy, the offensive integration process. One is from Monty, one is from KD. I'll read the Monty one first, and it's pretty simple. He said, great players demand a double team, right? That's what he said. He got that from Nate McMillan, which you'll remember Monty got his very first head coaching experience ever filling in while Nate McMillan was recovering from a health problem, like in the early 2010s or maybe even late 2000s. He said, anytime you have a guy that can draw a double team, you have to do your best to take advantage of it. On the flip side of that, Durant being the guy who's demanding that double team, here's what he said. And at the very end of the quote is something you might have already heard him say. He's repeated it a lot since he's been here. But the whole quote is, just being the center of attention for so many different schemes, I try to make the right play and get an advantage. And then here's the money quote. When you get 2 on the ball, that's when your offense really starts. You've probably heard him say that already, and it distills it down to the essence of why basketball gets so simple and so easy offensively when you bring great players who are versatile, share the ball, have a high IQ together. That's the type of basic stuff that you can manipulate. You get that type of an offensive rating. 112 is better than, I believe, at least a handful of teams' overall offensive rating, including a fast break dunk, It's their half-court offensive rating, which means no transition, no fast break, no mismatches, no advantages, just running sets. Where the ball crosses the timeline, the defense is set, how are you scoring? 112 is incredible, and it is so simple. And so on that note, I want to get into usage, how much each player has been shooting and scoring, and what everybody has said about that in just a second. First, today's show, guys, is brought to you by Ultimate GM. You might have played football, soccer, different versions of this game, but we're super thrilled to have them as a new partner and sponsor of today's episode. They have unveiled a basketball version. It is called Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NBA GM and managing your own basketball franchise, which, judging by the comments here in this show, I don't doubt many of you think you have that all figured out, and this is the way to test that. This is the way to have some fun with that. You can manage every strategic aspect for your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring coaches, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise, dealing with owners, all of it. Locked On Suns listeners can get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store, so make sure to check that out. You got to download the game or visit probasketballgm.com or look it up in the App Store. That's probasketballgm.com. Use the promo code Locked On in the game store to get a doubling boost for your franchise, a 100% boost. Ultimate Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. Okay, so we talked about dominance of the team and of this new Suns duo. I want to read you the usage rates of these players over the past 3 games, okay? That's it. I want to read you the usage rates. Number 1, far and away, Devin Booker, 32.4%. That is, compared to his season-long rate, higher, okay? So his season-long rate is 32%. In these 3 games, it's been 32.4. So he's actually, and remember, usage is shooting, shot attempts, and turnovers. Assists don't count. So he's either shooting or turning the ball over, which for Booker, a low turnover player, is going to mostly be shots. So we can think of it as he's shooting more with Durant than he did without Durant. Pretty noteworthy, right? Number 2 is KD, 24.8%. That's lower by a lot than what he had been. And that's kind of one of the crazy things that I want to just take a minute to acknowledge. We talked so much, and even since he's debuted, we've talked about how seamlessly he figured to integrate into this team, right? My co-host on the Just Basketball show, Chris Manning, based in Cleveland, covers the Cavs, but he calls it Kevin Durant's superpower. Right? The malleability that he has. But you got to just take a step back and look that already he has made an effort to take fewer shots, fit in rather than making the teammates adjust to him. And on top of that, or as a result of that, whatever way you want to think of it, he's also been the best player on the court in all these games, I would say, and still incredibly productive because, as I just read off, I will remind you, the Suns Booker and Durant are the only duo in modern NBA history to score as many points as they have in their first 3 games together. All of that despite Durant taking a step back. Okay. Here's what he said about integrating and why it's kind of worked. He said, "We have such an unselfish team and we want to move the ball a lot. A couple times last game, Booker had a one-on-one opportunity with not a lot of help, and he was getting downhill and getting whatever he wanted. That's always a good thing when your best player is willing to come off the ball. What's funny, though, is as I just laid out for you, Booker's shooting more, being even more involved in the offense from a scoring standpoint than he was. So, yeah, he's coming off the ball, but he's still getting so many open shots that it almost doesn't matter. Let me read you the other 3 and 4, which are they're the players you're expecting, but the numbers are pretty shocking here. So number 3 in usage in these past 3 games with Durant is Chris Paul, 14.8%. Again, the caveat, the reminder that I always put in here, I'm sure you've heard me say it before when I'm talking about usage rate. If you think about basketball has 5 players on the court, your usage rate is out of 100%, which is why it's a percent. And if you cut that all up, in theory, and we know this is not how it actually works, in theory, everybody gets 20%, right? Everybody gets 1/5 of the shots. That would be average, right? So no team has 20-20-20-20 like that, but that's the idea. That's the comparison point that I think can be helpful. Chris Paul is at 14.8% before the trade, or I'm sorry, not before the trade, but overall on the season, he is at 19.2% usage rate. So he has dropped 5 percentage points too. And then you have DeAndre Ayton, the biggest drop off. Prior or overall on the season, 23.4% usage rate, so above average, and I believe considerably ahead of where he's been in his career. I believe that 23.4% usage rate is a career high. It is, or it's pretty much tied with the COVID shortened season when Ayton only played 38 games, Monty's first year coaching, which was an up and down and kind of strange season for DA with the suspension and the ankle injuries and then the bubble. So he was at basically a career high, and he is at 11 percentage points lower now. And that backs it up. We've seen it, right? I mean, I think he's taken single-digit shot attempts in the last 2 games, and in the first one against Charlotte, he only had 10. It's going to be a big adjustment phase for him. I want to read one more quote from Monty that I think is illustrative of kind of this dynamic and what they want the mentality to be. All right. So Monty said today, we don't say to any of our guys that you have to take 20 shots, you have to take 10. It's just what the game dictates. If DA gets 20 shots in the flow of a game, everybody would be happy about it, but it's not something we choreograph at all. I kind of think that's true. And not that I think Monty would like lie, but I do think that almost not even the Ayton part is what makes me embrace or sort of like buy that. It's more so that Durant has taken such a back seat. One, that shows me that they're not like trying to cut up, okay, we're going to run this many sets for Durant because he's the best player. And then we're going to run this many sets for Booker because he's the second best player. Whatever. If they were doing that, Durant would have clearly been taking the most shots and had the highest usage rate. The other reason I kind of buy it is what you do if you're not choreographing is, for the most part, that ends up being you put it in the player's hands. And in this case, what's happened by putting it in the player's hands is that Durant has been able to take it upon himself to integrate the way that he sees fit, which is to take fewer shots, right? And so it's kind of been led by him first and foremost. And again, I don't know what that means for Ayton. I don't really want to keep jumping and speculating and trying to imagine what that might mean for Ayton, but I do think it's a little bit of a different dynamic when what's driving the difference in shot attempts is more so the players making decisions than it is the team not running stuff for him. We've had this debate endlessly. I'm sure fans are still doing it. I'm sure there will be comments in this YouTube channel till the end of the season about how they didn't look for Ayton and whatever. I guess if you're the type of person that thinks that is a continuing problem, you got to blame the players, not the coach, is where I come down. Last quote on this note, though, is Durant was asked if it's similar to Golden State in terms of the integration process and the way that the offense flows and things like that. And he said, it's pretty similar with the amount of passes and assists we try to get a game. But when you have gifted scorers, you might not hit that number of assists, but the goal is to get a good shot up every time and try not to turn the ball over. Again, that simplicity is just going to be the through line. It can sound cheesy or corny, but this is the type of stuff that all basketball teams try to get to, If every basketball team could simplify things to the bare bones and let the versatility, the skill, and the IQ of their players lead and guide the way and reap amazing benefits from that, everybody would do it, right? It's a benefit. It's a luxury. It's a testament to the talent of the guys in place, that you can just sort of go out there, not overscript things, not do too much, and not really worry, but still have the best offense in the half court in basketball, or one of, and the 3-0 record and the best net rating and all these things. But you just hear that through line, the simplicity, the basics, just trying to get the best out of every situation is really going to be the ruling mentality the rest of the way. One more bucket of stats for you guys is going to be the shot diet. Where are the shots coming from for both the Suns and their opponents? How's it maybe different than in the past? How's it the same as maybe in the past? We'll get into all of that next. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, our favorite new sports betting partner. New customers at FanDuel get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app now. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers to threes drained. I'm feeling good about things today because I told you guys the Warriors are a bad road team. I told you guys that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was back and that line being favored, the Warriors being favored on the road in Oklahoma City, did not add up to me. That game just hit the final buzzer as I was sitting here recording, and lo and behold, the Thunder won by 9 points. So they covered, and they won outright. But tomorrow night, they are on the second night of a back-to-back on the road in Phoenix. Oklahoma City figuring and factoring into the Suns' night here on Wednesday. The Suns are 14-point favorites, basically 13.5-point favorites. Maybe that's a stay away. That seems like a very, very big line. We'll see if Shai even plays. They rested him out of the break with an injury. Then he got sick, and now who knows? But that's not the biggest deal. The biggest deal is that FanDuel has all those odds plus many more, and they even let you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay, so we've talked about dominance. We've talked about usage. Let's talk about shot selection, shot diets. Just where is the scoring happening from, both on the Sun side and on their opponent's side out of these three games. So I brought this up when I did a recap of the Bulls game last Friday night, and it's been a trend now over the course of all these games. The Suns only have 59 field goal attempts at the rim in these three games out of 262 total field goal attempts. Yes, I went through and counted up and tracked that for you. You're welcome. That's what you come here for. 22.5% of their shots have come at the rim. That is very, very small. I also think it's going to be the norm. Okay. Their opponents, again, I want to circle back to the Bulls and the Hornets are not very good. The Hornets are even worse. And three games with three different types of opponents, three different types of offenses. It's going to be hard to measure and track this Suns defense, even in 20 games, honestly, by the time the season is over. But here we are. That's what we have to work with. The at the rim shot attempts for the opponents have been pretty low as well. Okay, and that was the point that I made with the box score oddity in the aftermath of that Bulls game is I think both teams had less than 30 points in the paint in that game, and it was both teams broke 100. The Suns scored like 120, and they only had like 20 of those points in the paint. That's going to be how this Suns offense scores. I think that's just obvious, but defensively is going to be a little bit more interesting to track. I want to point out, KD has 4 blocks in the past 3 games, at least 1 block in each game. Monty pointed specifically to the block on Kyrie Irving as far as just what Durant's overall athleticism and length and IQ can do to clean up garbage, right? Like mistakes on the perimeter, elite talent like Kyrie Irving just getting to the basket. Durant is going to be able to just erase a lot of that. And so I lean toward that. We all think that will make an impact. We've seen low at the rim attempts by the opponents that the Suns have played so far. I want to see that as sort of a KD effect. I think it's too early to fully say that. Monty did also add, for the record, though, that the familiarity with Ron Adams, if you know that name, that's a Warriors assistant coach who's been there most of the Kerr era, but before he was with Kerr in Oklahoma City, or in Golden State, he was in Oklahoma City with Durant. And so the basic tenets and schematics of how the Suns want to play defense, Monty said, is basically pulled from that. And so pulled from the Ron Adams school of defense, basically. And so Durant will have a pretty high level of familiarity and comfort with all of that right away. Back to the Suns. Let me save that stat. I want to talk a little bit about the post and the elbow and some of this stuff. So if you've seen clips from practice, Dwayne Rankin has posted a few. The Suns themselves on their social media channels have posted a few. You'll see that how much they're just practicing. And I saw it today at practice. Dump the ball into Durant at one of the, elbow extended, post extended areas. Maybe there will be some screening on the weak side. Maybe there will be some motion, some cutting, whatever. But basically, do that, get the double, and get repetition catching and shooting off of that. Like, they are really practicing that. That sounds so basic, but it's going to be such a consistent and efficient part of what they want to do offensively that they actually are like repping it in practice. A very basic thing, a very good player standing there and throwing it out to another very good player who shoots it is, again, kind of funny, but also an indication of this. And so I guess what I'm pointing out from a shot selection standpoint is there's going to be a ton of Durant shots from that spot on the court, and there are going to be a ton of open threes that result from that. We've already seen it. A lot of the threes that Ish Wainwright made, a lot of the threes that Okogie took and missed, a lot of the threes, frankly, that even Booker or Paul have gotten have come off of very basic action like that. The last thing is less so of a where on the court the shots are coming from and more so of a when they are coming nugget for you guys. But the Suns on the season are 20th in seconds per offensive possession. So that's from a website called playbyplaystats.com. And it's a better way to look at pace. It's not possessions per game because that is impacted by the team you're playing. It's solely measuring what is the average number on the shot clock when your shot goes up, right? And the Suns were 20th in that stat. So bottom 10, basically, in that stat over the course of the season. Since March 1st, when Durant came, the past 3 games we're talking about, they are 28th in that statistic, and they're taking almost a full second longer to get a shot up. What's crazy to me about that is to combine that with the half-court efficiency that I brought up in the first segment. What that means is the Suns are running less, they're finishing possessions in transition less often, and despite all of that, they're leaning into what is supposed to be a harder way to score, which is slowing things down, getting into the half court. And despite all of that, as I told you, they have added 16 points per 100 possessions from their season prior to Durant onto their half court offensive rating. 16 points better per 100 possessions. If they maintain that, pack it up. It's done. They're not going to, right? It's 3 games, again, to remind you, for the 15th time, bad teams in the first 2. We'll see more actual challenges as we go forward, but the fact that they are doing something that most teams avoid, which is slowing things down, and it's working better for them, should not be happening. But again, when you have that talent, when you have that IQ, when you have that versatility, that's just going to be what happens. I will be looking a lot more at the defense. We will have to do more of these shows, checking in, monitoring trends, etc. I hope we can start to see some differences in overall shot distribution and things like that since Durant has come into place. The Durant effect as a rim protector that I'm telling you I sort of see or want to see. We'll see if that's real. But I hope you guys learned a lot in this show. It was fun to dive into this stuff. We will be back tomorrow after the final buzzer of Thunder Suns. When I get home from covering that game, I will be coming to you to talk about it. Hit follow or subscribe to get that show and many more every Monday through Friday, plus weekends when there's games in your feed every day. We'll round out the week with Aaron Edwards on Thursday, going into Friday. So do not miss a show. In the meantime, make Locked On NBA your second listen today to get caught up on everything else going on around the association. That show's available on all podcast platforms as well. And I'll talk to you all Wednesday night.